My wife tried to poison me and our son with her signature beef stew. I remember the taste, rich, slow-cooked, laced with rosemary and something else I couldn't place. Within an hour, my limbs were heavy, my head spun, and Luca couldn't even hold his spoon. When I stumbled into the ER, I thought it was food poisoning. But then a nurse grabbed my arm, leaned in with panic in her voice, and whispered the words that shattered everything I knew. Don't go home. Call the police. Now. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. The first thing I remember is Luca's fork clattering to the floor. His hand had just gone slack, fingers trembling, eyes wide and unfocused. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a low, breathy groan before his head slumped sideways onto the table. I opened my mouth to call his name, but the sound caught in my throat like gravel. My vision blurred at the edges, and suddenly the dining room tilted. The fork. The smell of rosemary and beef. My heart hammering like a war drum against my ribs. Celeste. I gasped. What did you put in that? She was already at the sink, rinsing the ladle back, turned as if nothing had happened. She didn't even glance at me when I crashed into the chair beside Luca, my knees refusing to hold. I reached for my phone, missed it. My fingers wouldn't work. I could hear her humming. By some miracle, I got Luca into the car. I don't remember the drive, only that the world outside was smeared and spinning, and that he was moaning faintly in the passenger seat. When I stumbled into the ER holding my son, I didn't even get my name out. A nurse saw my face, saw Luca, and rushed us through the double doors without a word. Alarms, shouts, bright lights. Then a cold hand gripped my wrist tight. I looked up. It was the nurse, young, wide-eyed voice shaking. She leaned in and whispered, "Don't go home. Call the police. Now." I couldn't process it. Not until the doctor came in with the test results barbiturates, heavy tranquilizers, enough in both our systems to knock out a full-grown adult, twice over. "What did you eat?" he asked. I blinked. My wife's beef stew. And just like that, the floor of my life gave way. They kept Luca overnight for monitoring IVs in both arms. He was pale and quiet, twitching in his sleep. They asked if he had a history of seizures. He didn't. The toxicologist said if we'd eaten even slightly more, our breathing could have stopped. He looked at me like he wanted to say something but didn't, just patted my shoulder and walked away. I sat in that cold hospital room, watching the heart monitor beep steady against the dark. And I replayed every moment of that dinner, every smile Celeste gave us as she served our bowls, every laugh she faked about her secret ingredient. I remembered her raising her glass, toasting to family loyalty and fresh starts. I remembered how she kissed Luca's hair and winked at me. And I remembered how the warmth in her eyes never reached the rest of her face. It was then that I felt it not just fear, not just anger, but betrayal so complete it scorched everything behind it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, planned, executed with the calm of someone who thought she'd already won. The woman I married had tried to kill us. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until morning came, then stared at Celeste's name on my phone screen for another hour, wondering what voice she'd use if I called her. Concerned, dismissive. Furious that we hadn't died. Instead, I called someone else a number I hadn't dialed in years. A voice on the other end said, "You're ready then? I didn't even ask how they knew." "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a contract. And from that moment on, everything I did, every move, every lie, every calculated step wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. And I wouldn't let her win. The morning after the hospital was all gentle whispers and sterilized quiet, like the world was tiptoeing around something it didn't want to wake. Luca lay curled in the hospital bed, his small frame dwarfed by tubes and machines. He blinked slowly when I approached, his lips too dry to speak. I held his hand, brushing back his hair like I used to when he was 4 and had nightmares about sea monsters. This time, the monster had fed him stew. The nurse brought breakfast, Jell-O toast, and water. I ate nothing. My stomach was a knot of questions and rage. I thanked her, and before she left, I asked, "Has Child Protective Services been notified?" She nodded. "Per protocol, but we didn't list a suspect." Yet. I turned to the window, afraid of what my face would show. Because I knew the suspect. And I was married to her. When Luca was cleared for release, we stepped outside into blinding spring sunlight. I had my arm around him. He walked slower than usual, as if his body wasn't entirely convinced it was safe to function yet. I didn't take him home. I took him to my cousin Jordan's condo on the Upper West Side. Clean, quiet, empty for the week. I tucked Luca in, told him a story about dragons who couldn't be tricked, then sat at the kitchen counter for hours. I opened my laptop, started digging. Celeste had her passwords saved to our shared drive, lazy habit from when I handled our taxes. Bank accounts, personal email, and her secret folder labeled Vision 2025. I expected finances. What I found was planning, spreadsheets, budget breakdowns, a transfer of $80,000 to a private account in Delaware 4 days before the poisoning, booked flights to Greece, a villa rental listed under her maiden name, and worst of all, 2 first-class tickets. 1 adult, 1 child. Not mine, not Luca's. A different name entirely. I stared at that name, Jaden Carr, for a long time. Then I searched it. A gym trainer. Younger. Worked at a luxury fitness club downtown. Model side gigs. A face you'd expect to find shirtless on billboards selling cologne. She was planning to vanish with him. The pieces fell into place with cruel precision. The strange phone calls she always took in the bathroom. The recent interest in overseas property. The way she suddenly wanted to reclaim her independence even though she hadn't worked in years. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I did something far colder. I opened a new document and titled it Phase 1, Exposure. I would need proof. Real proof. Not just screenshots and suspicions. And for that, I had to go back. That afternoon, I took Luca to a friend's place, someone I trusted from college, a tech consultant who owed me. Then I drove home. Celeste was in the kitchen, wiping down the very same counter where she had set the poisoned bowls. She turned, startled. "Noah?" I thought. "You thought wrong," I said, calmly, stepping inside. She looked relieved. "They said you were—" "We're fine," I cut in. "Luca's recovering." "Oh, thank God." Her voice trembled, and for a second I almost believed the tears she blinked back. What happened? Was it the stew I followed the same recipe? I held her gaze. "We need to talk." And I hit record on my phone inside my pocket. She sat, played the worried wife, spun a story about spoiled meat, misread expiration dates, and kitchen stress. Her performance was convincing, almost good enough to sell. But her pupils dilated too wide when I mentioned the hospital. Her hands shook not from fear but calculation. By the time she poured herself a glass of wine, I had 47 minutes of subtle evasion and veiled contradiction recorded. When I left, she kissed my cheek. "I'm so glad you're okay." I didn't flinch. But as I walked away, I whispered, "So am I." Because now I had everything I needed to burn her carefully constructed world to ash. The nights were the hardest. When Luca finally fell asleep, I would sit alone in the dark, staring at the ceiling, reliving every smile Celeste ever gave me, every promise she broke. I was trapped in a spiral between rage and disbelief, but I had one weapon left myself. The man I once was, the man she thought she could break. I pulled out my old journal. The pages were yellowed with age, but held the story of who I used to be: a soldier, a protector, someone who never let fear dictate his actions. I closed the book and stared at my reflection in the mirror. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was war. The first step was to unravel her lies. I logged into the shared drive again, tracing her financial moves with ruthless precision. She'd opened new accounts in hidden corners of the internet, funneled money offshore, and booked trips she claimed were business. But the transactions told another story: luxury spa weekends, expensive jewelry, and one very suspicious purchase, a burner phone registered under the name Jace Morrison. Jace. The name struck a chord deep inside me. I ran it through social media, and there he was, a personal trainer at Elite Fitness downtown. Photos showed him with wealthy women, always the charming outsider. I dug deeper and found what she wanted to keep hidden: multiple messages between Celeste and Jace, speaking in code about finalizing the plan and moving on after the storm. It was a betrayal layered with cold calculation. Meanwhile, Luca drifted in and out of sleep, his face pale and fragile. I watched him closely, remembering the boy who used to run through the park without a care in the world. Now he was haunted by shadows I couldn't chase away. The guilt gnawed at me. I had to be strong for both our sakes. I called Marcus, my old college friend and trusted tech consultant. He was my anchor in this storm. Over encrypted lines, I laid out the situation. He promised to dig into Jace's digital footprint, find every thread connecting him to Celeste, and monitor their movements. Days passed like a fog. I balanced being a father protector and silent investigator. Every text alert from Marcus sent a jolt through me: names, locations, suspicious bank transfers. Celeste was weaving a web of deceit, and I was tracing its strands. One night, as Luca slept beside me, I reviewed the photos from his last swim meet. There, in the background of one image, stood a man leaning casually near the locker room entrance, Jace, his arm resting lightly on Luca's shoulder. It was subtle, but unmistakable. I swallowed hard. Jace had been in our lives far longer than I realized. I sat back and thought about how Celeste must have felt inserting this man like a wedge between me and my son, slowly eroding our bond, while keeping the act of the perfect family intact. Luca stirred awake, and I held him close, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But I would. For him. For us. The man I once was, the man I needed to become again, was rising from the ashes, and this time I would not let them win. The man who walked into my office 2 days later looked more like a soldier than a physician. His name was Dr. Everett Lang, and he didn't waste time with pleasantries. He carried a leather briefcase, wore a steel gray suit, and moved with the rigid precision of someone who'd once been trained to kill. His eyes swept the room once, walls, corners me, before sitting down. "I got your message," he said. "And I have questions." "I have answers," I replied, sliding a printed copy of Luca's toxicology report across the table. "Start with that." He scanned the paper with quick, efficient movements. Then, without looking up, asked, "You know how lucky you are to be alive. I do now." "And the boy, recovering?" "Slowly." Lang leaned back. "I've seen war zones that left fewer scars. For years, Lang had been my attending physician for minor issues. We bonded once over a shared hatred for bureaucracy and a love of baseball. I didn't know until recently that he had spent a decade in Army intelligence before switching to medicine. Quiet man. Sharp as a scalpel. I reached out when I realized I needed someone who understood both physiology and strategy. She planned it, Everett, I said. The dosage, the timing, the exit strategy. She thought I'd go down fast and quietly. He set the report aside. "You're not the first man to be betrayed, Noah, but you're one of the few who walked away with the evidence still in his blood. Is that why you brought it?" I nodded toward the briefcase. He clicked it open. Inside a small black pouch, a printed case file, and a thumb drive. He placed the pouch between us, unzipped it, and revealed a Glock 19. "I'm not here to encourage violence," he said calmly. "But if your instincts say she might try again, you better not be caught unprepared." I stared at it longer than I should have. The weight of protection. Or destruction. I wasn't sure which anymore. He slid the drive forward. "Everything I found is on their confirmation of the barbiturate-type dosage estimates and purchase history." She didn't cover her tracks well. Someone this confident always gets sloppy eventually. "Did you find anything on Carr?" Lang nodded grimly. "Jaden Carr has a sealed record in 2 states. Domestic disturbances possible. Fraud a girlfriend who filed an assault complaint 2 years ago and then vanished. No charges stuck, but the man's not clean. He's been using multiple aliases, rents cars in fake names, opens temporary bank accounts. He's either running from something or preparing to disappear again." My throat tightened. "With my son." Lang's eyes locked on mine. "Not if you act first." For a long moment we sat in silence. The air between us was thick with unspoken things. I knew I wasn't capable of murder, but I was starting to understand how men reached that edge. "I don't want to become them," I said. "Then don't," he replied. "Become smarter, more careful, and faster." He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "There's a reason they underestimate men like you, Noah. They mistake kindness for weakness. Don't let them." After he left, I stared at the gun for what felt like hours. I didn't touch it. I didn't move. I just sat there thinking about Luca's laugh, the curve of his hand in mine, and how close I'd come to losing that forever. Later that night, I added a new line to the redemption folder. Item 4, neutralize threat. Secure custody. No compromise. Celeste thought this was a chess game. She'd positioned her pawns, dressed them in charm and deception, and assumed I was too gentle to fight back. But now the board had changed, and I had just put my first piece in motion. The plan was deceptively simple. Disappear. Make them believe I was dead. Let Celeste and Jaden sink into their false victory before I struck. It was the only way to protect Luca and build the evidence I needed without interference. I abandoned our car near the riverbank doors, opened personal belongings inside my wallet. Luca's jacket, a grocery receipt. Marcus, my closest friend and former Army Ranger, planted false GPS data showing I'd driven off disoriented into the water. It was a perfect illusion. The world would mourn a man lost to a tragic accident. For weeks I lived in shadows. The safe house was miles away from everything familiar. Concrete walls, steel locks, and silence. Luca was scared at first, but I told him this was our armor, our shield. Days blended into nights as I sifted through every lie Celeste had told. Bank statements, messages, social media, every secret meeting with Jaden. every wire transfer hidden from me. There was no going back. But I couldn't focus only on facts. I needed the bigger picture. So I watched the news. Celeste played the grieving widow, perfectly tearful interviews, solemn promises to protect Luca, a carefully crafted script convincing to everyone but me. Jaden lurked in the background, cautious yet confident. They believed their story, but I knew otherwise. I tasked Marcus with intercepting their communications. Their panic was evident. Celeste whispered to Jaden, "He's alive. We have to find him." Jaden's voice hissed, "Get rid of him. No loose ends." They hunted ghosts. One night, a photo arrived in my encrypted inbox, Luca outside the safe house window. Someone was watching us. Fear hit like a punch to the gut. Celeste and Jaden were more dangerous than I thought. I showed Marcus. His face tightened. "We need to get creative." Together we crafted a trap, an anonymous message promising closure if they came to a neutral meeting, one last chance to settle everything cleanly. We chose an upscale downtown restaurant, no hosts, no waitstaff, just a note at the table. "It's time to come clean." The invitation was a lie, a lure. They took it. Luca bore the weight of our secret alone, the lost home, vanished friends, and constant fear eroding his young spirit. But his resilience surprised me. When he asked if we'd ever go home, I promised this was temporary, that one day we'd walk into the sun together. We weren't just surviving, we were reclaiming. The night arrived. I hid behind a two-way mirror in a rented suite overlooking the venue. Cameras Marcus installed fed live footage to my laptop. Every detail was under watch, polished silverware. Murmured conversations, tense guests. Celeste entered first, dressed in black eyes, sharp and scanning. Jaden followed his jaw, tight hands twitching like a predator. They sat at the table, empty chairs opposite. No hosts, no waitstaff, just a note reading, "It's time to come clean." Their whispers confirmed my suspicions. Celeste confessed fear. I was alive, mixing regret and calculation. Jaden threatened to disappear if things went wrong. Their stories unraveled with every breath. At the perfect moment, Marcus whispered they were about to leave. Suddenly, plainclothes officers entered, flashing badges and reading rights. Celeste's mask shattered. Jaden cursed panic, breaking his composure. Justice was here. The man presumed dead was alive, and the battle was just beginning. The next time I returned to the house, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a showroom for a life that never existed. Everything was untouched. The mail stacked neatly, the flower arrangements still fresh from last week's book club. But every surface I touched made me flinch, like it had been scrubbed to hide something sinister. Luca stayed with Jordan for the afternoon. I didn't want him to see the shell of what used to be his home. I moved from room to room, filming everything. The playroom where he used to build forts with blankets untouched. The framed photos on the hallway wall still showed smiling faces, but I couldn't look at them without seeing what lay beneath. I opened the cabinet under the kitchen sink and pulled out the cleaning supplies. Tucked behind the bleach and dish soap, I found 2 unlabeled amber bottles. Both were half empty, the same shade as the sedative Dr. Lang had identified. I bagged them, labeled them, and added them to the redemption folder. The upstairs bedroom smelled of expensive perfume and deception. Celeste had always obsessed over luxury. She once said, "Scent is memory." She wasn't wrong. The fragrance that clung to the pillows made my chest tighten. I remembered the nights she curled against me after a long day, whispering how lucky she felt to have a man who didn't give up. I used to believe those words. Now I realized she was rehearsing them for someone else. In the closet, her clothes still hung in perfect order, designer dresses, silk blouses, heels arranged like art. But tucked in the corner was something she'd never want seen, a duffel bag. I opened it and found a stash of burner phones, prepaid cards, and a passport under her maiden name. She was preparing to vanish, and she hadn't planned to take me or Luca. Downstairs, I logged into the house's smart system using my admin access. Her search history was still synced. Flights to Argentina, how to erase digital footprints, legal loopholes for custody across state lines. She wasn't just betraying me, she was building a whole new life on the ashes of mine. I downloaded every log timestamp and Wi-Fi ping, then wiped the system. If she was going to run, she wouldn't be doing it on my dime. That night I sat on the back porch and looked out at the yard where Luca used to chase fireflies. I remembered the first time he fell and scraped his knee, how Celeste ran to him like it broke her heart. I wanted to believe that version of her had been real, but the woman she'd become was someone else entirely. I pulled out my phone and called Daphne. I found the passport, I told her. The fake IDs. She was planning to disappear. "We'll add it to the affidavit," she replied. "Every breadcrumb she leaves makes your case stronger. She's going to run Daphne. I can feel it. Then we run faster. You're not just playing defense anymore, Noah. You're hunting now." That word echoed in my mind, hunting. I'd never imagined myself that way. But now every move I made felt like part of something deeper, strategic, focused, inevitable. I opened a new document on my laptop and labeled it Phase 2, Collapse. Under it, I typed, "Isolate her financially. Expose public persona. Target car's criminal record. Secure emergency full custody motion." The foundation she built her life on wasn't love or truth. It was lies and borrowed time. And now I was tearing it down one stone at a time. It started with a phone call at 2:14 a.m. I woke to the shrill ring heart, already pounding dread lodged deep in my chest. I answered without looking. "This is Officer Janine Calderon from NYPD. Is this Mr. Noah Ryder?" "Yes. We need you to come to St. Luke's emergency room. Your son was brought in, he's stable, but you need to be here. Immediately." I was already halfway dressed before she hung up. When I arrived, the waiting room was a blur of harsh lights and disinfectant. A nurse guided me past curtains and gurneys until I found Luca curled in a hospital bed, eyes open but dazed, a bandage on his forehead, dried blood near his ear. "Daddy," he whispered. I held his hand. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here." The nurse handed me a clipboard and murmured, "They said he fell down a few stairs. But the bruising, it doesn't line up." "Who brought him in?" I asked. Her face tightened. "Your wife. She left right after. Security footage shows she ran from the building." Ran. Not waited. Not explained. Ran. A doctor arrived moments later. "He's going to be okay. No concussion, but we're keeping him overnight. The injuries suggest blunt force trauma more than a simple fall." I kissed Luca's knuckles. My mind was already racing. I stepped into the hallway to call Daphne. "She took him without permission," I said. "Now he's in the ER." There was silence on the line then. "That's enough. We're going to file for an emergency hearing today, first thing. She ran Daphne. She dropped him and ran. She's unraveling. No, she was combusting. Hours later in court, I sat across from her again. But this time she looked hollow. Not polished, not perfect, just unraveling. Her hair was messy. Her makeup cracked at the corners. She wore the same coat from the night before, stained at the cuff, with what I guessed was Luca's blood. "Your Honor." Daphne began, "The mother abducted the child in violation of a standing court order, endangered his life, and fled the hospital without explanation." We request immediate full custody and supervised visitation only. Celeste's lawyer looked like he'd been dragged out of bed. My client was under emotional duress. She drugged her own son. Daphne snapped. Now she's physically harming him. What's next? The judge raised a hand. Enough. Ms. Ryder, do you have anything to say? Celeste stood. Her voice cracked. He turned my son against me. He made me feel like I didn't belong in my own family. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted to talk to him alone. I stood too. You hit him. I didn't mean to. The judge's face hardened. I am issuing a full custody order in favor of Mr. Ryder effective immediately. Ms. Ryder is restricted to court-supervised visitation only. If there is any further violation, I will authorize criminal charges. Celeste collapsed into her seat, sobbing into her hands. But the courtroom was silent. Nobody moved to comfort her. Back home, Luca curled into my side on the couch, finally asleep, after a long day of tests and tears. I stared out the window, watching, as the world outside spun on, as if nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. I wasn't just defending my son anymore. I was defending the part of myself that still believed in justice. That night I opened the Phase 2 file and added a final bullet: expose her publicly. Let the world see who she really is. Because now this wasn't just about survival. It was about reckoning. For the first time in months, the house felt like it belonged to Luca and me again. The locks had been changed. The curtains replaced. I painted over the old yellow in the hallway and let Luca pick out superhero decals for his room. We filled the kitchen with cereal he liked, stocked the fridge with things he recognized. There were no more gut cleanse broths or raw mushroom powders Celeste used to force on us. Each small change was a defiance, a quiet reclamation of what she'd tried to erase. One afternoon, Luca came into the kitchen carrying his toy hammer and said, "Daddy, can we build something?" "What do you want to build? A rocket? One that doesn't break?" I looked at him, my chest tightening. He wasn't talking about toys. So we built it 2 hours with tape cardboard and hope. When it was done, he hugged me tight and whispered, "I feel safe now." That night I sat at my desk while he slept, reviewing my next move. I had the judge's order, full custody, and a digital vault of evidence, everything from bank statements to hospital records. But one piece was still missing. Jaden. I hadn't seen him since the courthouse. He'd vanished when Celeste cracked, and that told me something. He wasn't just a side character. He was part of the architecture of her plan. I hired a digital investigator. Not cheap, but worth it. "Find him," I said. "Everything aliases, assets, sealed records. I want to know who I'm really dealing with." The report landed 3 days later. Jaden Carr wasn't even his real name. Born Jordan DeMarco, he had 2 prior arrests under sealed agreements, both involving fraud and coercion. He'd conned women before, and once sued for manipulating a widow into signing over her estate. But the most chilling detail: he had changed his legal name 6 months before meeting Celeste. She wasn't just a victim of his lies. She had known exactly who he was. They'd found each other because they wanted the same thing: status shortcuts control. Daphne helped me draft an anonymous tip that exposed Jaden's prior fraud allegations to a watchdog podcast that covered white-collar corruption. Within a week, a segment titled "The Man Who Disappears After the Damage" aired nationwide. His face, his real face, was out. And Celeste. She tried to do damage control. She filed a motion to regain visitation, claiming emotional distress had impaired her judgment. But her own lies had unraveled too far. Daphne stood before the court and presented Jaden's record along with photos of Celeste and Jaden on a supposed retreat just 2 weeks after Luca's ER visit. The judge wasn't moved. She denied the motion. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, first a trickle, then a full storm. Somehow word had gotten out. "Mr. Ryder, is it true your wife attempted to poison you? Is she facing criminal charges?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The real answer was already playing out in headlines. Back home, I tucked Luca into bed, and as I turned off the light, he asked, "Did we win?" I smiled softly. "Not yet, buddy. But we're close." He nodded like he understood more than I gave him credit for. After he fell asleep, I stared out into the night, knowing full well that the final storm hadn't hit. But for now, I had the upper hand. The house was calm. My son was safe. And I was no longer just reacting. I was ready. The final unraveling began not in a courtroom, but in a cocktail lounge on the Upper East Side. Celeste had been invited to speak on a Women of Power panel, ironic considering she'd built her brand on curated half-truths. Her PR team must have been desperate to restore her image, and for a while it looked like they were succeeding. Articles resurfaced with soft focus photos of her at charity galas. Her Instagram quietly reactivated captions loaded with faux humility and healing journey hashtags. But image is fragile when your foundation is rot. That night, I watched the live stream from my office. She wore a silver blazer, hair slicked back in a power bun, voice composed. As women, she said, we often navigate a world that punishes ambition. I chose not to be punished. A round of polite applause. I clicked pause and opened the prepared press folder. Jaden's sealed arrests, the anonymous podcasts segment, financial manipulation emails, the photos of Luca's injuries redacted for privacy, but damning. Then I hit send. Within 20 minutes, the media storm hit like a missile. Buzzwire. Breaking. Jaden Carr's real identity and connection to Celeste Ryder exposed. True Justice Mother lost custody over alleged poisoning attempt, new ties to fraudster lover. Celeste's panel ended early. She walked off stage to flashing phones and questions she couldn't dodge. One clip went viral, her frozen expression as a reporter shouted, "Did you seduce a con man to help you steal custody of your own son?" She didn't speak. She just walked faster. The next morning, Luca and I ate pancakes while the TV played on mute. Every channel had her face, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, always falling. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. Later that day, Daphne called. "We received a notice. Her attorney's withdrawing from the case. She's cornered. She knows it." That afternoon, I got a call from a restricted number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Noah Celeste," said her voice thin. "Please, we need to talk. There's nothing left to say. Not for me, for Luca. He deserves peace, something you destroyed. You made me look like a monster. You did that all on your own." She was silent. Then a whisper. "He still asks for me." I closed my eyes, pain slamming through my ribs. "Yes. And when he does, I tell him you're getting help. That one day, maybe when it's safe, you can see him again. But only if that day ever comes." She hung up. That night I sat on the balcony watching lights flicker in the Manhattan skyline. Jaden's name had vanished from his firm's website. Rumors swirled about federal investigations into identity fraud. His house was listed for sale. Meanwhile, Luca's drawings were taped proudly on our fridge. His therapist said he'd stopped wetting the bed. His teachers said he was laughing more. We were healing. Quietly. steadily. The queen had fallen. The illusion had shattered. And in its place, I was building something real. I wasn't fueled by revenge anymore. I was fueled by restoration, by love, by clarity, and by the fierce, unshakable knowledge that even in ruin we can rise. It came in the form of a subpoena. 2 months had passed since the media storm gutted Celeste's brand and torched Jaden's professional life. I'd stopped checking the gossip sites, stopped responding to the whispers and emails from strangers congratulating me for winning. Winning wasn't the point. Peace was. But Celeste didn't want peace. She wanted resurrection. The subpoena was for a deposition in a civil suit. She was suing me for emotional defamation and intentional character sabotage. Her claim that I had orchestrated a media campaign to destroy her life cost her endorsements clients and mental health. It was laughable and dangerous. Daphne slammed the papers on my desk. "She's testing you. She has no case, but she's betting you'll settle to make her go away. She's using the system to bait me, because it's the only thing she has left. We countered with everything. Timelines records the court's own ruling on custody and endangerment. We even submitted affidavits from Luca's teachers and therapist to show his improved condition since full custody shifted." Still, Celeste showed up to the deposition dressed in white. A symbol, a performance. She sat across from me, a cup of untouched tea in front of her, and smiled like we were old friends catching up. "You look tired, Noah," she said softly, microphone picking up every syllable. "And you look desperate," I replied without blinking. Her lawyer opened with rehearsed outrage. "My client has suffered irreparable harm from a campaign of lies orchestrated by Mr. Ryder. Her reputation, mental well-being, and livelihood have been systematically dismantled." Daphne didn't flinch. "Your client's own actions led to her downfall. We have the court rulings, hospital records, and multiple verified accounts of her behavior." The deposition dragged for 6 hours. Celeste cried twice on cue, spoke about postpartum trauma, losing herself, manipulation by Jaden, and still loving her son more than anything. But the cracks showed. She forgot dates, contradicted earlier testimony, slipped when describing her retreat with Jaden, calling it a honeymoon, then quickly corrected herself. It didn't matter if she won the case. The truth was solid, and everyone in that room knew it. A week later, the judge dismissed the suit with prejudice. That night I took Luca to dinner at our favorite Italian place in the West Village. He ordered spaghetti, no meatballs, said he wanted to stay up late and watch a movie. I said yes. We got home to a letter waiting at the door. It wasn't from the court or her lawyer. It was from Celeste. "Noah, I'm done. You win. There's nothing left for me to fight. I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't ask to see Luca again, not for now. Maybe not ever. But I did love him. I just didn't know how to be the kind of mother he deserved. Maybe one day he'll understand that, or maybe it's better if he doesn't. I'm leaving the city. I won't bother you again. You were always stronger than I ever gave you credit for." See, I burned the letter. Because she was right about one thing, I didn't need her ghost haunting our new life. Later, Luca fell asleep during the movie, breathing softly against my arm. I carried him to bed and tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and turned off the light. Downstairs, I poured myself a drink and stepped onto the balcony. The city pulsed with quiet noise and distant horns, but in our corner of it all, I heard, was calm. No lawyers, no cameras, no poison. Just this moment where silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like peace. And I knew then that she had played her last move. The board was clear. And this time I wasn't just surviving. I had won. Mornings had a new rhythm now. Luca's alarm went off at 6:45 a.m., followed by the clatter of feet down the hallway and the sound of him trying to pour cereal without supervision. I'd find half the milk on the counter, the other half in his bowl. He'd grin when I walked in and say I almost did it. And honestly, most days that was enough. We were building something steady, something ours. It started with the little things, choosing a new rug together, repainting the living room, replacing Celeste's minimalist art with framed snapshots of Luca at the park, Luca holding a paintbrush, Luca asleep in the car after a long day at the zoo. The apartment no longer whispered of her. It breathed with our presence. My work had shifted too. I scaled back on high-pressure clients, opting instead for freelance contracts that let me pick Luca up from school. His face lit up every time he saw me outside the gate, like he still couldn't believe I was there day after day. Therapy helped, for both of us. He opened up more, not just about the stew, but the months before it, how he'd wake to arguments at night, how he learned not to speak during dinner, how sometimes he'd pretend to be asleep just to avoid being told he was too much. He never used Celeste's name. He just called her the lady who used to live here. And that hurt. But it also healed. One evening after dinner, Luca asked, "Can I tell you something?" Always, I said. I don't miss her. I didn't push, I didn't ask why. But he kept going. I miss having a mom, but not her. Is that bad? No, I said gently. It means you're honest. That's brave. He nodded, then asked if we could adopt a dog. We didn't get a dog, but we did volunteer at the shelter once a week. It became our thing. And for Luca, who once feared every loud voice or sudden noise, it gave him something to care for, something that didn't ask questions, just loved. Meanwhile, Celeste stayed silent. No calls, no letters, no sightings. Part of me waited for the other shoe to drop for another stunt, another court motion. But nothing came. Her accounts had gone dark. Her name had faded from headlines. Whatever story she'd tried to script had ended, and no one was waiting for a sequel. That didn't mean I forgot. It meant I finally didn't have to look over my shoulder. I spent my nights writing journaling memories, piecing together the fragments of the past 2 years. Not to publish, just to process. Sometimes I'd reread the court transcripts, not out of spite, but to remind myself I hadn't imagined it. The chaos was real. The betrayal was deliberate. And the fact that I'd made it through with Luca intact, that was a miracle I didn't take for granted. One Friday night, I took Luca to a bookstore cafe. He picked out a graphic novel, I grabbed a legal thriller, and we sat for hours just reading across from each other. When it was time to go, he looked up and said, "I like our life." It was simple. Unprompted. And in that moment it became the most important sentence I'd ever heard, because the past had claws, but it no longer had control. We were rebuilding, brick by brick, together. It started with a school project. Luca's teacher sent home a family tree assignment, one of those well-meaning activities that assumes all homes are whole. We sat at the kitchen table with crayons, markers, and construction paper. He drew me at the top, then himself just beneath. The next branches were harder. "Do I put her?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. "That's up to you." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "I'll just write Mom. No picture." Later that night, I found him in his room staring at a blank sheet of paper. "What's that for?" I asked. "I want to write her a letter, but I don't want to send it." "Okay," I said, sitting beside him. "Want me to help? No. Just want to do it." So I left him to it. 20 minutes later, he slipped the paper into a drawer and said nothing more. After he fell asleep, curiosity gnawed at me. I opened the drawer, hesitating before unfolding it. The handwriting was shaky, but every word cut deep. "Dear Mom, I don't know why you tried to hurt us. I used to think it was my fault. I thought maybe I was too loud or too annoying, but Dad says it wasn't me. I believe him now. Sometimes I still dream about you yelling, or about the stew, but mostly I just dream about our dog walks at the shelter and pancakes on Saturdays. I like those dreams better. I don't hate you, but I don't miss you. Maybe I will one day. Maybe not. From Luca. I folded it back exactly the way he had and left it untouched. Some wounds don't bleed. They whisper, and his were slowly finding peace. A few days later, Daphne called. You might want to know Celeste filed to renounce her parental rights. I said nothing at first. She claims it's for Luca's well-being. Said she won't fight custody ever again. And Jaden, out of the picture. Last I heard, he's under federal investigation for identity theft in another state. Fitting. Do you want to respond publicly? No, I said. Let silence be the statement. Celeste's exit wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. It was quiet. Faded like the last page of a book no one finished reading. Weeks passed. Luca's therapist noted how much calmer he was. The school called to say he'd been nominated for a kindness award by his classmates. Not the smartest, not the fastest, just kind. I'd never been prouder. One evening, I opened my laptop and stared at a blinking cursor. I began writing a letter of my own. Not to Celeste, not to the media, to myself. Dear Noah, you didn't fail. You didn't imagine it. You survived. And now you're more than that. You're present. You're healing. You're a father and you're enough. It wasn't polished, but it was true. The past had left scars, yes, but scars prove we healed. And every quiet morning, every silly joke, every bedtime hug from Luca stitched the rest of me back together. We didn't need applause. We didn't need justice in headlines. We just needed what we'd found: stability, safety, love that didn't have to be earned or feared, the kind that shows up every single day and never leaves. The thing about dreams is they don't die all at once. They erode quietly, slowly, until you wake one day and realize you've stopped reaching for them altogether. Architecture had always been mine. Not the drafting tables or blueprints, but the vision, the idea that spaces could heal, could hold people better than people sometimes held each other. I used to imagine designing homes that didn't just impress, but embraced. But when everything with Celeste fell apart, I shelved that part of me. Survival took its place. Then, one rainy Saturday, Luca and I ducked into a community library that was hosting a model building event for kids. Cardboard skyscrapers, foam parks, little paper benches with glue stains, and lopsided paint jobs. He loved it. So did I. Can we make something, he asked. We can build anything you want. He chose a fire station. We worked side by side, passing scissors and cardboard walls like sacred tools. When it was done, he looked at me and said, "We should build a real one someday." I laughed, but inside something flickered. That night, I dug out my old laptop from the back of the closet, dusty, slow, but still holding a folder labeled Foundations. Blueprints, designs, even a grant proposal I'd never submitted. Dreams I had packed away with no intention of revisiting. I stayed up until 2 a.m., just looking through them. Not sad. Not nostalgic. Hungry. The next week, I made a few calls. Reconnected with old mentors. Found a small nonprofit focused on revitalizing public spaces in underserved neighborhoods. They needed volunteers. Then consultants. Then someone to spearhead a new youth center design. I didn't even hesitate. Luca and I had our routine now, morning school drop-off, his aftercare program, and I could manage the work in between. It was slow at first. Foreign. But my instincts returned one sketch at a time. Why now, Daphne asked when I told her. Because I finally have the emotional space to do it. You're not building buildings, Noah. You're rebuilding yourself. She was right. One afternoon, Luca sat beside me on the couch, watching me sketch out a lobby design. Is that for your job? Kind of. Can I help? I handed him a pencil. He drew a crooked slide between two rooms. That's for when kids get bored during meetings, he said. I kept it in the plan. The center broke ground 3 months later. It wasn't mine entirely, but it carried my mark, my input, my sweat, my rediscovered purpose. And when they asked me to say a few words at the opening, I stood in front of a modest crowd and said the truth. We don't always get to choose what gets taken from us, but we do get to choose what we build next. The applause was polite, warm. But it wasn't the noise that mattered. It was what came after. Luca ran up and hugged me so tight it nearly knocked the mic from my hand. This is the coolest thing you've ever done, he said. Better than surviving. Better than winning. I was living. Dreams deferred weren't always dreams denied. Sometimes they just needed time to grow back stronger. There's something strange about healing, how it doesn't come in grand gestures or dramatic moments. It comes in circles, like the one we made that night around a fire pit at the new community center. Parents, kids, teachers, volunteers, and me with Luca tucked under my arm roasting marshmallows on a metal skewer. He insisted on holding himself. He'd made friends, real ones. Kids who didn't know his past, who didn't look at him with pity. Just laughter and sticky fingers and Pokemon cards traded under streetlights. And me, I was starting to laugh again, too. Not the hollow kind I'd used when everything fell apart, but the kind that rumbles from deep in your chest and surprises you mid-sentence. The director of the center pulled me aside. You should lead our design team full-time, she said. I'm not ready. You are. But I wasn't sure. For so long, my identity had been about surviving, protecting Luca, fending off damage, rebuilding from wreckage. What did it even mean to thrive again? That night after Luca fell asleep in the car, I carried him up to our apartment. I should have gone straight to bed, but something in me needed quiet first. I stepped out onto the balcony and stared down at the lights of the city. My city now. Ours. I thought about Celeste. Not with anger, not with grief. Just thought. She'd disappeared from the headlines, the courtrooms, and most importantly from Luca's mind. Her final act, giving up custody, was both the most selfish and the most selfless thing she'd ever done. She'd freed him. And me. I thought about Jaden, too. How someone so loud, so arrogant could vanish so quickly under the weight of his own schemes. Last I heard, he was awaiting trial in a federal court several states away. No more threats, no more smirks. Their power had always come from chaos, and chaos couldn't survive in the stillness we'd built. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. I didn't know how to love either of you, right? I know you'll never forgive me. I'm sorry anyway. No signature, no plea. Just the weight of truth on paper. I didn't show Luca. I didn't need to. He was too busy building Lego towers taller than the coffee table and reciting facts about sea turtles. His world had grown without her in it, and that was how it should be. The circle had closed. But what mattered now was the center, us. I finally took the full-time role at the center. We moved into a bigger apartment with a tiny garden that Luca swore was haunted. He planted sunflowers and talked to them every morning. Plants grow better when you're nice to them, he explained. I believed him. One evening he asked, "When I grow up, can we still live together? You might change your mind. But I want to. Well then, I'll make sure there's always a couch for you." He smiled and leaned into me. The pain, the betrayal, the courts, the hospitals, they didn't disappear. But they no longer defined us. We weren't the aftermath anymore. We were the life that came next. The quiet was the hardest part. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of the fight. For years, I was in battle mode, eyes sharp, mind calculating, every muscle ready for the next attack. The nights were sleepless, the days stretched thin by legal jargon, whispered rumors, and the steady ache of watching my son recover from wounds both seen and unseen. But then one morning, I woke up and realized the enemy had disappeared. Celeste was gone. Jaden was gone. Their ghosts no longer stalked our home or our lives. In the silence, I heard Luca's laughter more clearly. I saw his smile without the shadow of fear behind it. And I remembered what life was like before the storm, the simple moments, the little joys. We started to build a new rhythm, no longer defined by what was lost, but by what we had. Luca blossomed into a young man with quiet strength. He became a beacon of resilience, his kindness not a weakness, but a testament to everything he'd overcome. I watched him in school, at soccer practice on weekends, volunteering at the shelter. Each day was a victory, a stitch in the fabric of a future he'd earned. For myself, I found peace in creation. The community center was no longer just a project. It was a symbol of renewal, not just for the neighborhood, but for my family. Sometimes the scars throbbed. Memories surfaced unexpectedly, a glance, a scent, a phrase. But they no longer controlled me. I learned to hold them gently as reminders of the battles fought and the strength gained. One evening, Luca and I sat on the balcony gazing at the city lights. The skyline shimmered like a promise. He turned to me, eyes bright, and said, "Dad, do you think people really change?" I thought about it. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "but change takes time, and it takes wanting it more than anything else." He smiled. "I think I'm ready." "Good," I replied, "because I'm ready to keep moving forward right alongside you." We sat in comfortable silence, two souls stitched together by love and resilience. The war was over. Not because the fight had ended, but because we had found something stronger, peace. And in that quiet, I finally understood. Some stories don't need complicated endings. Sometimes justice is simply living. Some storms don't end with the sky clearing. They end with you standing there drenched and shaking, realizing the thunder was never the scariest part. It was what it took from you on its way through. But storms pass, and what's left behind isn't always wreckage. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's truth. Sometimes it's the quiet strength you didn't know you had until you were forced to use it. This isn't a story about revenge or even justice. It's about something quieter, more lasting resilience, the kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that whispers, "You made it. You're still here." Pain will try to define you, but it doesn't get the final word. What does the choices we make after? The choice to rebuild even when your hands still shake. The choice to love again even when your heart has been broken in silence. The choice to keep going, not because life is perfect, but because it's yours now. And that is always enough. Thank you so much for watching and joining us on this emotional journey. We'd love to know what part of this story stayed with you the most. Drop a comment and share your thoughts. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Until next time, take care of your heart and never forget how strong you really are.